Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to part 2 of the mathematical logic unit. So here today we're talking a little bit about what's called conditionals, which I hopefully you recognize as a review term for you, an inverse and a contrapositive statement. So if you recall before, you had a conditional, that is the if-then statement. You also had a converse. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what an inverse and what a contrapositive means. So in all total, you should have 4 statements that you should be able to work with. Conditionals, converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So let's kind of back up. Conditional and converse, just a quick review. So if I have a general statement, 16-year-olds are allowed to drive. As a conditional, if the person is 16, then they are allowed to drive. So if P, then Q. So P would be the person is 16. Q would be they are allowed to drive. So the conditional, the hypothesis, the person is 16. Conclusion, they are allowed to drive. The converse means flip that around. If the person is allowed to drive, then they are 16 years old. That is what converse means. Conditional, if then, converse, switch it. What changes this when you go to inverse statements? An inverse keeps the conditional the same way, except it negates both the first part and the second part. All right, so my conditional statement, if monkeys wear hats, then the moon is blue. Again, I don't care about truth value right now. I'm just looking at the actual statement. So if the monkeys wear hats, then the moon is blue. So if monkeys don't wear hats, then the moon is not blue. That would be an inverse statement. Okay? So I would take whatever the conditional statement is, and I'm going to use the word not, don't, won't is another popular one. All of those things to negate what is happening. Okay, so over here, if I look, if it is Tuesday, then it isn't snowing. So if it, as an inverse, so I would have to say if it is not Tuesday, then it is not snowing. I use not in there twice. I kind of say the opposite of the hypothesis and the opposite of the conclusion. I need both there. So for the second one, if you don't do your work, then you will be behind. So now here I've already got a don't. So I have to say the opposite, so I have to actually switch it back. So if you don't do your work, so the opposite of that would be if you do your work, or if you do your work, then here I would say instead of you will be behind, I would say you will not be behind. So if you do your work, or if you do your work, then you will not be behind. So I have to say the opposite of what's there and the opposite of what's my conclusion. So the opposite of P, oftentimes said not P, then not Q. This little symbol, which is like a Spanish tilde, basically means not. So inverse means use not twice. So a contrapositive takes your inverse and takes the way I say it is, it takes the converse of the inverse. And what that means is I'm going to take the statement, which ends up being an inverse, and I'm going to switch it around. Okay, if you remember converse, my conditional is if P, then Q. The converse says if Q, then P. My inverse says if not P, then not Q. Contrapositive basically takes the inverse and flips it, kind of like a converse. So my contrapositive, which is often written like this, if not Q, then not P. Okay, so that's kind of what my contrapositive is. It's often labeled or shortened up, or that would be the symbol for it. So if I take a look, if it is the weekend, then the school is closed. So if I think about it from the perspective of my hypothesis, the P there, the school is closed, that would be the Q. So the inverse would be, if it is not the weekend, then the school is not closed, which would make sense. Opposite of it being the weekend, would it be not being the weekend? If the school is closed, then the school is not closed, implying that the school is open. Contrapositive flips this around. If the school is not closed, then it is not the weekend. Okay? So I'm doing two things here. Inverse, use not a couple times. Contrapositive, flip it. So on this side, I'll keep that accessible so you can see it. Two angles are vertical. If two angles are congruent, then they are vertical. The inverse, if two angles, so instead of are congruent, they would say are not congruent, then they are not vertical. Okay, this would be my inverse. Two angles are not congruent, then they are not vertical. So the contrapositive, which is that symbol, C++, sometimes it's just C++. So if you write just C++, I wouldn't count it wrong. So contrapositive, just to shorten it up, because mathematicians don't like to write a whole lot. So I would just flip this around. If they are not vertical, and they implying the two angles, then the angles are not congruent. So if they, implying the two angles, are not vertical, then the angles are not congruent. So I'm going to flip it around. If not Q, then not P. Okay, let's take a look here. If I wanted to kind of take this from start to finish, the lion is the king of the jungle, which, you know, I'm not caring about truth value right now. So my conditional, if the animal is a lion, then it is the king of the jungle. Or I could just put it, then it is king of the jungle. And I'll shorten it up a little bit. So flip it around for converse. So if the animal is the king of the jungle, then it is a lion. 3 would be the inverse. So here I would use not. Say if the animal is not a lion. Remember, I go back to the original statement. If the animal is not a lion, then it is not king of the jungle. And the last piece, change colors here so it's something easier to read. The last piece, if the animal is not king of the jungle, then it is not a lion. So that is all 4 statements there. So let's just kind of walk right through it one more time. So if the animal is a lion, then it is king of the jungle. So that's my conditional. If the animal is the king of the jungle, then it is the lion. That's the converse. Inverse uses not. If the animal is not a lion, then it is not king of the jungle. And lastly, if the animal is not king of the jungle, then it is not a lion. So there's 4 different ways to write these statements. Some of them use not. Some of them just flip them around. Some of them do both. So good way to remember, converse, flip, inverse, not, contrapositive, both. Flip and not. Okay, if you have any questions, please come talk to me. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your work.